Glad to see some students here. Very glad to see students, and then glad to see all the colleagues, or most of the colleagues. So today's talk is by Professor Chetan Parikh and not by me. So I'm supposed to chair the session. So we all know about Professor Chetan. That he did his undergraduate from IIT Bombay, then he went to do his PhD in US, and then came back as a faculty in IIT Bombay. And he went back to US to two of the universities, Missouri and Purdue University, and once again came back to India. So he has a very dynamic variety of roles he has played. And then finally he came to IIIT-Bangalore, and I think he joined in June last week, 2015 or so. That's how I remember. But I just wanted to share something more than whatever is written in the profile. So all these contents are already there. As a PhD student, when I was doing my PhD in Alabama, I think in 2010 or something, in the later part of the year, I was given a textbook by Professor Kenneth Ricks in University of Alabama. He told me, use this textbook and prepare the lab contents. I was a TA, so I was supposed to slog. And I used that textbook. I really liked the textbook. And so I did the lab part, constructed the lab activities, everything around. Students were happy, very happy. Professor Ricks was very, very happy. Then I asked Professor Ricks that why did you opt for this particular textbook? Professor Ricks said, no, I think this is the best book I have seen. So please use it. And please use it whenever you are teaching. In the future you will be teaching this set of courses. So I took his word. The third author of the book, I was very, very glad to meet him in June 2015 when he joined the institute. The book is called The Integrated Electronics by Millman and Halkis and Chetan D. Parikh. Okay. So very, very glad to meet him when he joined the institute, and I continue to learn a lot of things from him, from the book. We still use that book for our courses. There's one more thing. I just browsed in the web, in the internet, in the Google especially, typed in the word best books for electronics and circuits. I think I got the search results. It said that there are two books which are very, very popular, and one of that particular textbook is co-written by Professor Chetan D. Parikh, and it still continues to inspire a lot of students, a lot of faculty across. Right? It is called as the best-selling book, especially for the students interested in circuits. That's kind of a comprehensive or consolidated knowledge is what is embedded in that particular textbook. Right? I just wanted to give all of you just something which is not, he doesn't mention about it, and which is not in the profile of the web page. Okay. I have said one more thing, and then I'll invite him. So I've known Professor Chetan since 2015, and he's a very good analog faculty, very good analog expert. And he teaches Introduction to Professional Ethics, Introduction to Ethics course for the IIM Tech. I have known one more very good analog faculty in US when I was doing my MS in University of Arkansas, Professor Ken Vickers. So he used to work in TI, and then he used to teach in Arkansas, especially on the analog and mixed signal circuit design. And he also used to teach Introduction to Professional Ethics. I took his course also. I really enjoyed. So someday I have a desire to know whether there is any connection between the analog circuits and then the ethics. Right? So on this particular note, I'd like to invite Professor Chetan to deliver his talk on both the topics.
Thank you, Madhav. The reason I don't mention Millman Halkias much is because it is a book by Millman and Halkias. I am kind of just also ran, as my wife says. So as the abstract said, I'm going to quickly do analog, digital to analog converters. So I see some of my IM Tech students here. I assume you've read the abstract. So you're not going to learn much of circuits here today, very little about it. So this first part is about digital to analog converters. So this is the contents. So analog to digital and digital to analog converters they are everywhere. You know, they are part of every large electronic system which has any real life interaction. Any electronic system that has a real life interaction will have A to D and D to A converters, because all real life signals are analog. So they have to be converted to digital, then the computing facilities do whatever they do, and they eventually get converted back to analog so that human beings can interact with them. So audio, video, temperature, pressure, all real life signals are analog. So this is one of my research areas, to design A to D and D to A converters. So they are used everywhere, right? Smartphones have probably about 3 D to A converters, maybe more. Biomedical instrumentation, ECG, EEG, video players, set-top boxes, TVs, thermostats, a lot of them. So they are very useful, they are pervasive. Today, as in right now in the world, these are kind of the broad areas in which research is being done in A to D and D to A converters. We always want to continuously increase speed, we want to increase resolution, that means make them more and more accurate, and then I'll add other features. Today the specific thing I'm going to talk about is calibration schemes, one calibration scheme. So what is a D to A converter? A D to A converter is one that has a digital input and an analog output, and in between is a circuit that does the conversion. The number of bits here, this is the number of bits, there are 4 here. Typically there will be 12 to 16, sometimes 20, sometimes 4, but 10 to 16 is a nominal number. So here is the conversion equation. The output voltage is equal to 8 times D3, 4 times D2, 2 times D1, 1 times D0 times some constant, some voltage divided by some constant. There are various types of circuits that convert digital voltages, signals to analog voltages. One major one is called a current steering DAC. Current steering DACs are the fastest DACs available today. There are then resistor DACs and capacitive DACs. All of them are used widely, but if we want fast, we'll use current steering. So this is a simple kind of conceptual diagram of how a current steering DAC works. So there is an 8 times I, 4 times I, 2 times I, 1 times I. And these digital inputs are applied. If the D0 is 1, then that switch will be connected to the right hand side. Similarly, if D1 is 1, that switch is connected to the right hand side, and the current flows in that RF. And so the currents will all add up in RF, and then you'll get that equation will be satisfied by this equation. And one can add, if there are 12 bits, you'll have 16, 32, 64, etc. That's right, the 8421 is a binary, because the digital number is binary, so those will go as binary. Here is a actual circuit made of MOSFETs, which is one of these is this. Okay, there are many different types. Here is one. I will not explain how this works. One major problem with all electronic circuits is that with time and with temperature, values change. So we want this to be exactly I, this exactly 2I, but it never exactly stays I and 2I. It changes because of temperature, because of time. But when I want the conversion, we want the output analog voltage to be accurate. I'm listening to my MP3 player, and if this conversion is not accurate, the audio will be distorted. Accuracy is very critical in this conversion. but temperature varies, current varies. So what does one do? Well, of course, there are many things one can do. One of the things that can be done is called as calibration. So the principle here is, so here is that one current source which is supposed to be, let us say I, but due to some errors, it has become I minus delta I. Then what one does is, one does this scheme. So there is some well-defined constant reference current source. One compares this current source with the I. This is supposed to be equal to I, so they are both equal. If this is less, then an error current flows to the control circuit, and that control circuit determines the value of this additional current source that's put in parallel with the original current source. So by this feedback loop, this will be made exactly equal to delta I. So I minus delta I plus delta I, so the current that comes out is I. Yes? Yes. It would also affect the reference current. That's a very good question. So what is done is, it is possible to design one current source which is very well temperature compensated. So even if as temperature changes, it will not change. But the circuit that is required to make this temperature compensated source is very complicated and very big. So if I have like 16 current sources, I can't make all of them compensated. I can make one. So we make that one compensated and then use that reference to calibrate all the others. So this is a basic scheme of calibration. Of course, what goes inside this, what goes inside this is a different story, varies. So there had been proposed in the literature a scheme where there was a calibration DAC. So for each of these currents, so this is a DAC. For each of these current sources, there is another DAC that will be used to calibrate that current source. So there will be a cal DAC that will go inside the control circuit for each of these current sources. There will be one cal DAC for this, one for this, one for this, one for that. And that's how each of the current sources is calibrated. So that was a successful scheme, but it required a lot of area and it dissipated a lot of power. The advantage of that was that the cal DAC can save and remember whatever it calibrated to. It will remember that value for a long time to come. So the scheme we came up with, so we said, well, can we use one cal DAC for all current sources instead of one for each of the 4 or 12 current sources? We have one. We will use to calibrate one by one each of the current sources. And what we'll do is we'll save the calibrated value on a capacitor for each current source. So we'll replace 12 cal DACs with one cal DAC and 12 capacitors. What that does is it will take much lesser area and therefore much lesser power. So this is a paper that was published in VDAT 2017, and magically it had won the best paper award also. This Pallavi Daji is my PhD student. She is in Gujarat. Okay, so very quickly, this is a proposed calibration scheme. This actually is the only current, the current source, that I is only this. The rest of it is all calibration. I will not explain. This is a capacitor that will save. This is the cal DAC. So this cal DAC and the SAR is the common for all current sources. There are current reference sources here. Okay. This is a more complicated, a more elaborate description of the same scheme. Results. So there are two measures of errors in DACs. One is called a DNL, one is called an INL, differential nonlinearity and integral nonlinearity. So before calibration, as a function of the digital input code, this was the error. And the DNL is measured in something called as an LSB, or least significant bit. So this was, the highest was about 10 LSBs, somewhere between 8 and 10. After calibration, the error came down to about 0.3 0.32 LSB. So this shows that the scheme we proposed worked very well. The error went down from about 10 to about 0.32. And the other measure is INL. So INL was also about minus 18 LSB, and it came down to about plus minus 0.2 LSB.
The error for the binary code is shifted, that's okay.
As long as that error remains within a bound, that is okay. You don't care how it is behaving, because how it exactly behaves will vary from one circuit architecture to another. We want to make sure that it is within a bound. The bound is actually plus minus 0.5. So this is within plus minus 0.2. Okay. That's all. Lots of references are there. I just put a few that there were references. That is all. Okay. Any questions? Yes, sir. Yes.
So one is you have used the capacitor to store the calibration.
Yes. Yes.
Basically reducing the resistance. I guess that's the primary.
That's right. That's right.
So how susceptible are capacitors to any kind of drift or variation? How reliable they are?
Right. So actually the temperature and drift are less of a concern for capacitors. The greater concern is that the capacitor leaks charge. It's going to slowly go away. So the difference between the earlier scheme where they had the cal DAC for each bit that stayed, this capacitor will lose charge, so one has to refresh it. So the calibration has to be done much more frequently than what had to be done in previous scheme. So that is a price one pays. One saves a lot of area, but one has to do a calibration much more often than otherwise. Yeah.
Second question, yeah. What's the interpretation of a negative error?
Negative error means that the actual current is below the reference value, which is okay. Either way is okay. As long as it is within a bound, it's okay.
Absolute difference.
Correct. Correct.
The DACs that are used in our phones or everywhere,
Yeah.
are they are recalibrated?
They have to be calibrated.
So how
Yeah.
is that?
So this is kind of built into the program. So it will automatically calibrate itself every once in a while.
So which ones do they use? The DACs?
These are all current steering DACs.
All of them are.
All of them are. Because you need very fast for especially for video applications, you need very fast DACs. Audio, I don't know. He's the big boss. He's my big boss. So for audio, I don't know what they use, but generally current steering is. Yeah.
So capacitors, what kind of rates do you get?
Sorry. Few hundreds of kilohertz you'll get. For
Video DACs you will get.
For video DACs you get megahertz. You get megahertz. Up to 1040 megahertz you get. Yeah. Yeah.
You and the search that you showed
Yeah.
was for a particular kind of DAC.
Current steering DAC. Yes.
So in these, there must be different types of DACs.
That's right.
These results of this method.
No, it can't. Every DAC has to have its own way of calibrating, because this was to calibrate a current source, because it's a current source DAC. A capacitive DAC doesn't have current sources, so they'll have a different scheme of calibrating. There you will want to calibrate mismatches in capacitances more than anything else. So before I start, I want to do a little preface. So this is our topic, the difficulty of knowing what is good or what is right in the modern world, I should say. Circuits are easy to project, and one points at a circuit and talks about a circuit. How does one project ideas? I don't have circuits anymore. So how do I present a topic like this? There are two ways of doing this. One is I'll just talk, but my experience is that if I just talk, then the amount that is absorbed from what is said is maybe a fraction of what is actually said. So lately I've been experimenting with projecting what I want to say on the screen and read it so that it stays there and everyone can look at it and think about it, because you still have it visually available to think. And then we go to the next slide. So that's what we are going to try. Rather than talking, we'll read, because a lot of this is actually quotes from various people, the great Aristotle, etc. So it's very nice to read Aristotle, right? It's fascinating, at least. So that's one thing I wanted to say about the style of presentation. The other thing I wanted to say was, so we're talking about ethics, and clearly I anticipate controversy. I mean, I welcome controversy. Unlike D2A converters, where I can talk with great authority and saying that this is true and you cannot argue with me, I am the expert, I shall not say any such thing about this topic. So we will have a discussion. So there are two types of discussions. One is, we'll read something that Aristotle says, for example. So let's have discussions during and then at the end of the presentation. Two types. The during is if there is a clarification, we didn't understand something, we want to understand what this means, then let's discuss that during the presentation. If there is I don't agree, let's keep the don't agree till the end of the presentation, because if we get into the I don't agree in the middle, we never finish. And I do want to finish what I want to present. So we'll read, we'll stop, discuss whether something is not clear, finish it, then free for all. All right. These are the three main sources from which I have taken all the material. I discovered this book when I was teaching the ethics course last time. Really an excellent book on a comprehensive study of ethics through human history, more particularly Western history, but still it's really a brilliant book. Aristotle, of course, and Alasdair MacIntyre, kind of a modern philosopher. Okay, the content is, we'll start with Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas, Renaissance and the Age of Reason, Alasdair, and then some examples. Okay, so we start with Aristotle. So these are quotes from Aristotle. Can I request somebody to read? Somebody has a loud voice. Yes, sir. Huh? It's okay. You can read now. So, yes, sir. Just this slide. Just this slide.
Every action aims at some good.
Go ahead. Yes. Yeah.
If there is some aim which we desire for its own sake, everything else being desired for the sake of this, clearly this must be the chief good. There is not the knowledge of it that have a great influence on life. That is not like archers who have a mark to aim at. Be more likely to hit upon what is right.
Alright? Every action aims at some good. If there is some aim which we desire for its own sake, everything else being desired for the sake of this, there is something. There are lots of things we desire. There is one thing we desire for its own sake, and everything else also we desire for its sake. Then that surely will be the chief good. And if we could figure out what that was, that will be nice to put it in layman's language. Alright? Alright? Okay. Somebody else? Sridhar sir, you have a nice loud voice. You have a nice loud voice.
Now we call that theoretical quality of pursuit more final, and that which is quality of pursuit. that which is never desirable for the sake of something else, more final than the things that are desirable both in themselves and for the sake of the other things. Therefore, we call final without qualification that which is always desirable in itself and never for the sake of something else.
Right? It's nice to read Aristotle. It's a great exercise for one's brain, no? And it's a different kind of exercise compared to programming or electronics or data science. It's good. We call without qualification that which is always desirable in itself and never for something else. So there is nothing beyond it. All right? That is a chief good. Now such a thing, eudaimonia, is held to be. What is eudaimonia? Happiness, flourishing, well-being, the good life. I call it sukh. I think sukh is the most appropriate translation. English doesn't have an appropriate translation. So Aristotle says eudaimonia. We'll say happiness for the sake of simplicity as the chief good. All our actions ultimately aim at achieving happiness. This is what Aristotle says. Okay? As I said, we will not discuss do you agree or not. We will hold that thought. How is eudaimonia achieved? Aristotle asked. There may be a connection. You is good, right? You is good. Aristotle says in brief, eudaimonia is achieved by living a virtuous life. His ethics is called a virtues ethics because he says happiness is achieved by living a life of virtue. Such as virtues, lots of virtues, virtues have a social context. One doesn't acquire or exhibit virtues in isolation. There is always a social context. One looks at any virtue, prudence, compassion, kindness, honor, courage, truthfulness, whatever, honor, whatever, there is a social context. So a virtuous life is lived in the context of a community, right? And the community provides us opportunities and aids us in leading a virtuous life. Therefore, being part of a community is essential to leading a virtuous life and therefore to achieving eudaimonia or happiness. Okay? Aristotle said, therefore, that there is a causal relationship between happiness and a virtuous life. He said, if one leads a virtuous life, one will be happy. It's a causal relationship. If one leads a virtuous life, one will be happy. Alright, it's kind of a law. If I drop a stone from the second floor, it will fall down. It's a law. Aristotle said, virtuous life means happiness, leads to happiness. But I have, by the way, read through, I would not say every, just one second, every sentence, but I have read through Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, where all these are presented. He does not present a proof for this relationship. He says that there is a relationship. He does not say that, does not offer a proof. I think because a proof is not possible. Right? This is not a statement of science, and therefore a proof is not possible. Yes, sir. Ha.
Between happiness and virtuous life, so what is the cause and what is the happiness causes virtuous life or virtuous life causes happiness?
Well, this is my sentence, so I apologize for the ambiguity, but Aristotle is very clear that a virtuous life leads to happiness. Yeah. Actually brings in rationality also, but I thought that confuses, so I have skipped the word rationality. He says, eudaimonia is achieved by the activity of the rational soul performed with virtue. This is what he says. Alright, but that's complicated, so we'll not go there. Okay. We go to Aquinas. Saint Thomas Aquinas was a 12th century Christian philosopher and one of the greatest philosophers as well as one of the greatest Christian philosophers. One who kind of brought Christianity and philosophy together. Right? So he is regarded very highly in its ethics literature. So he agreed with Aristotle that the life of happiness is the end goal of human beings. Of course, he went further and said, well, that has to be related to God, because he was very extremely Christian and very God believing in God. We will not, this is just for information, it doesn't affect our line of argument. But that he agreed with Aristotle about eudaimonia being the end of human life. For Aristotle, potentiality, so I'm talking a slightly related but different subject. Potentiality is the capacity of an entity to be in a more complete state, to become what it could be in actuality. So a seed has the potentiality of becoming a tree. A seed actualizes its potentiality when it becomes a tree. Alright, so there is an actuality and a potentiality. Right, so there is a lot of things have potential. That potential is actualized. For example, what is the other? A caterpillar has the potential of becoming a butterfly. A human egg has the potential to become a human infant. Aquinas said the same thing. Aquinas said further that human beings have the potential to acquire virtues. So human beings don't have virtues, they have the potential of acquiring virtues. They are not innate, they must be acquired. They are innate only in the sense that the seed has the innate potential to become a tree. A human being has the innate potential to acquire virtues. So Aquinas said if they do not acquire virtues, that potential is not actualized. So in some sense, they are not fulfilling, to Aquinas, the purpose of their life if they don't acquire virtues. And when they do acquire virtues, they attain eudaimonia, which is what Aristotle had also said. Alright? So again, there is a Aquinas affirms the causality that Aristotle talked about. Of course, Aquinas will go further and say, well, this is God's law. Alright? Aristotle had to explain or try to prove, which he didn't, but he had to. Aquinas just said, well, this is a law of God. If you acquire virtues, you will become happy. This is what the Bible says, therefore it is true. No argument about it. Alright. What do the Upanishads say? You are that. You are Brahman. Every individual human being has the potential of becoming that. It is the same concept here. The human being has the potential of becoming Brahman, but it must be actualized. The potential is there. The actualization is left to human effort and activity. So the principle was there in all religions, and it was in Aristotle also before this. Right? So I don't know. Maybe he did. Don't know. This is 12th century, so I don't know Jesuits. My history knowledge is not that great. Okay, any questions? Yes.
So how does potentiality relate to eudaimonia? So if everyone exercises their potential or reaches their potential, that's the same as eudaimonia?
Eudaimonia is actualizing one's potential. When one
so if everyone actualizes their innate potential, then it is good.
Yes, that's right. Yes. Yes.
Last one.
Yes. This one.
This is fundamentally different to the other. What you said. I don't think they are. I mean, this is coming from very different direction. Here, you are actually affirming that everyone is basically pure.
Yeah.
As you go along, you acquire impurities. So the process of actualization is by preventing impurities from accumulating onto you than gathering virtues. So I think the process is completely different.
Okay, maybe, I don't know. Yes.
Aristotle says virtues, that's the means, and eudaimonia is the end. Is that right?
Yes.
And Aquinas, his focus is more on the means, on the virtues itself.
No, same. It does. Aquinas just adds to what Aristotle said, or expands to what Aristotle said. But Aquinas said the same thing. One must acquire virtues, but the goal is happiness.
But the first slide that you said about Aristotle,
yeah,
there it seemed like the means don't matter as long as the ends are achieved. Virtues, no virtues.
No.
The first slide it suggested that the end is the ultimate good is what is the most important, not any of the intermediates.
No, so good is achieved only by this. So this is also important. Yeah, one cannot achieve the end without the means. So.
Whatever you use to achieve the same goal would also be good. He has a
Correct. So one can disagree with Aristotle and say there are other means of achieving chief good. Fair enough. Yes, this is what Aristotle said. Correct. I agree with you. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Is happiness binary? You can attain happiness, so you cannot attain it. But can it be a degree?
No, it's a degree. It is a degree, and Aristotle says it accrues. Happiness now is not a one-time thing. It doesn't happen at one instant of time. It is gathered over a lifetime. All right. So it is a state achieved as one lives the good life. This is what he says. So, it's a very analog. Very analog. Completely analog. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. 1600s. So we go to 1600s. Most of you will know. So this was a time of great turmoil in Europe. The Christian church had become very dogmatic, very kind of political, and it no longer taught actually the principles, the teachings of Jesus Christ anymore. It was more interested in, ensuring its power base and control over the people. So the whole, the religion itself had taken a different meaning during that time. Simultaneously, the Europeans were going around the world, coming in contact with different cultures and bringing back these cultural learnings back to Europe. And so suddenly there was this multiplicity of truths presented to the European intelligentsia, saying, well, Christianity says this, but Hindus say something else. Now, so there was a confusion about what is the belief in the absoluteness of the truths of Christianity was getting questioned. Simultaneously, science was developing as a tool to study nature, Galileo, etc. And so the biblical accounts of nature were being questioned. That we all know. In parallel also, community life was getting all, the kings were tyrannical, the feudal system was doing a lot of oppressing the lower classes, and so the people also questioning values of community. So values of community were being questioned, values of religion were being questioned. So by 1800s, so that is the time of the so-called age of enlightenment in Europe, the philosophers had rejected both God and tradition as sources of morality, given this background, because to them religion was this dogma, this superstition. That is what religion had become. And simultaneously communities had become oppressive and not really conducive to human well-being. So if one rejects God and one rejects community and tradition, where do values come from? This is a question the philosophers were asking, and the answer they gave was humans. Humans could define values. They will not come from outside, neither from community nor from religion, but from humans themselves. Somebody read? Vivek.
So to be human meant to have the power and capacity to be master of one's own destiny, independently of divine guidance and of the laws of community life.
Go ahead.
Whereas for previous generations, nature was God's creation and the community was the arena for actualizing one's potential. For Enlightenment philosophers, individual humans became their own moral agents.
Others, I've put a little number here. This is 1, 2, or 3. So those are the 3 sources I had stated in the beginning. All right? Is it okay?
So Aristotle's definition did not use any notion of God.
Aristotle did not use any God. That's correct. That's correct. We'll come to that in a minute. Yeah. So Kant was one of the foremost moral philosophers of the age of Enlightenment. It remains today one of the most respected figures in moral philosophy. So Kant famously said, every man is his own moralist. Somebody? Sujit, why not?
From the quote,
Yeah, Kant's description.
Kant's description of enlightenment was that case when man emerges from the lack of courage to use one's own mind without another's guidance. That it cleansed the European mind of medieval superstition and allowed the light of reason to shine upon human problems.
In this one statement, it encapsulates the paradigm shift from what human values were before and after. So the use one's own mind without another's guidance, cleanse from medieval superstition and allow the light of reason to shine. I think if you look at the Indian society today, a lot of this is true to the Indian society today. Not saying 100%, but there is a lot of, a lot of this ethos has come, it has spread around the world and to India also. Okay.
Kant said that the only indisputably good thing is a good will. But being constrained by the need for rationality, he could not provide a convincing causal logic for why one should act with a good will. Kant's principles of universality of a moral maxim and treating a human as an end and not as a means remain the most pervasive and effective measures of morality even today.
So we'll see examples of this, but Kant said that anything you want to find out whether any statement is moral or not, what you do is you apply it to universalize it. You apply it to, if everybody was to be able to do it, what will be the consequence of? So for example, I say it's okay to lie. It's okay to tell small lies to get out of trouble. And if we were to universalize that to everybody telling small lies to get out of trouble, then that will lead to a contradiction, and therefore it is not an appropriate moral maxim. So that principle of universalizability is a very powerful, profound principle that still gets applied today to evaluate the validity of a moral maxim. The other is treating a human as an end and not as a means, or the basic human dignity. So any slavery, child labor, etc., are immoral because each human being has innate dignity. And this was first most articulately stated by Kant, and it remains today. Okay. So that is
So that sounds like just another name for eudaimonia.
no, goodwill is the intention. Intention. Whenever I do an action, my intention must be pure. This is what Kant said. So how do I assess whether an action is good or not? So there are lots of examples. Like there is a baby drowning in the river, and a guy jumps and saves the baby. Is that act moral? So Kant will say, well, we have, in order to determine if it is moral or not, we have to look at what his intention was. If he knew that this is the father of the baby is very rich and he'll get a reward, and that's why he saved, it's not according to Kant, that's not truly a moral act. It's a good act, but it's not a moral act. Only if it is done entirely out of goodwill, then it is a moral act. So it's a matter of intention. So okay, so we move to Alasdair MacIntyre. He wrote there's this book called After Virtue, written in 1984. Manpreet.
It was faster to recognize that the reason can access truth of fact and mathematical relations, but nothing more. It can only speak of means. About ends, it must be certain. Philosophers in the age of reason rejected any theological view of human nature, any view of man as having an essence which defines his true purpose.
Okay, let's continue.
They imagined humans not as creatures but with definite functions that they might fulfill, but as agents who possess no true purpose apart from that created by their own reason or desire. They rejected the notion of the telos, and that being virtuous enabled them to fulfill that purpose. In rejecting religion and telos, they rejected the causal relationship between virtuous life and eudaimonia.
So MacIntyre says that this is what happened as a consequence of the age of reason, which put reason at the center of human analysis, and the human being as the moralist rather than an external agency. The notion that human life has a purpose was rejected. The notion that being virtuous enables them to fulfill that purpose was rejected because reason could not establish a causal relationship between virtuous life. Yes.
For the Aristotelian view, right? Happiness causes.
Virtuous life causes happiness. Yes.
It is saying that when the age of Enlightenment came,
Yes.
a human being, they have the capacity to be moral, to decide.
To decide what is moral. Yes.
But you said that in the actual text, it says that eudaimonia is caused by activity of the rational soul performed with virtue.
Yes.
So I think that distinction is a significant one. It's not just was the activity of the soul leading a virtuous life. It is the rational soul leading a virtuous life, which I think has sticking with this, because saying that
correct. But so the difference is that for Aristotle, the rational soul was important in that one should not be irrational, but at the same time a virtuous life was critical. The age of enlightenment retained the rationality, rejected the virtuousness. That is the difference. So they say every human being will define what virtue is. the idea that a virtuous life is necessary for achieving happiness was rejected by the age of enlightenment. Yeah. Yeah.
The idea of a virtuous life and happiness, or that these are universal things that everyone will see and think. Are they rejecting the virtuous life and happiness, or are they saying to each their own idea of what a virtuous life is, or what their process is? Just the universality.
Right. So yes. So two parts. One is there a universal goal? They reject that. Individually, they say each human being decides what he or she wants to do. All right. What kind of life he or she wants to lead.
Right, but presumably they would all want to lead happy life or achieve happiness, except happiness for each one of them.
That's correct. That's correct. It's possible that everybody does still want to achieve happiness, but how that happiness is achieved, there is no universality to that question. There is no universal answer to that question. Yeah. Rishi, read now. I'm just catching people whose names I know. Louder.
Without a community, there is an emptiness. Having rejected the concept of individuals as embedded in and constituted by the community, the post-enlightenment world has come to see individual as the consummation of humankind's search for freedom. But McIntyre says such autonomy amounts to an emptiness, a vacuum, because what he calls the democratized self has no necessary social context and no necessary social identity. So the self can assume any role or take any point of view.
So this is the second thing McIntyre says. The first is that the causality between virtues and happiness is gotten rid of by the age of reason. The second thing is that the individual has become more important than community, because individual freedom is regarded as the highest good, highest goal. But because of that, he says, has come about an emptiness. Because the individual does not necessarily have social content or social identity. Yeah. Yeah.
He does not discuss social consistency. Because he says that you look at universalizing principle.
Yeah.
You are going and telling small lies.
Yeah.
Not only you got it, or
yeah.
Others also got it.
Yeah.
You have said so the community is not entirely
yeah.
against you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the difference is that what Kant says is, of course, all the age of Enlightenment philosophers, none of them rejected, quote unquote, the community. But just they put the supremacy of the individual was emphasized, because, and the historical context is important, because it is the communities were breaking down. There were just too many tensions and too much tyranny and atrocities, that the sense of community did not exist, and therefore the philosophers said, well, let's not worry about it. Let's think about the individual. So although Kant says that one must be able to universalize, that is only to ensure a non-chaotic society, right? But he does not say that a community is important for one's own morality or one's own moral growth. He does not say that. You see the difference? Yeah.
Just a comment. So thus far, at least,
Yeah.
the models that you see seems to have two characters. So one is a linear relationship between cause and effect. That is, we lead virtuous life, and with the linear differential equation, it leads to eudaimonic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And second is there is no concept of sustainability. So, for example, the dilemma between individual and the collective can easily be resolved with the concept if we had a concept of sustainability. For example, at some point in time, we had a society where all individuals realize their potential. It may be eudaimonic, but it may not be sustainable because they didn't contribute to social good. That is, they may not be able to sustain their eudaimonic. So Indian thought, since time immemorial, has been cyclic. There is an interplay between dharma and prana, that is sustainability and the innate potential. That it keeps on oscillating. And not just Indian philosophy, I'm sure Chinese, lots of Eastern thought.
Part of the model itself also universalizing process. If everybody does the same thing, then what will happen?
Yeah, if everybody does the same thing, is it sustainable?
Right, that was the model himself get us the issue of sustainability.
But it doesn't seem to be used as a fundamental principle of logic or philosophy.
Yeah, correct. I agree with you. I agree. That is true. That is kind of a limitation of the Western way of thinking. You are right. Yeah. Okay, I'm almost coming to the end. So maybe. So this is an interesting quote. Virendra Pandit, kind of unheard of. I kind of stumbled upon it thanks to Google. Let's catch who? Manisha. Read now.
The emerging trends of socialism sequence to be discovered into 19th and 20th century further stripped Europe of its spiritual basis and strength. Europe was like cancer patients, a chemotherapy by science was liberating it from the cancer of organized religion, but as a result making its body and spirit weaker and weaker.
Thank you. It's an interesting viewpoint that the organized religion, Christianity, was all messed up in Europe at that time, and science liberated Europe from that cancer. But in the process of, that English phrase of throwing the baby away with the bathwater, one wanted to throw away the bathwater, which was the dogmas and the superstitions, but with it also went the fundamental principles of Christianity, which were love your neighbor and don't judge others and do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Those were also thrown away. And anyway, this is just a perspective which I thought was interesting. And this is Viktor Frankl. Perhaps you've heard of him. He's a well-known psychologist, Jewish psychologist who went through the concentration camps and all. Let's see. Sachit, read now. This relates to the, so what the idea here is that the post-Enlightenment human culture has lost a sense of humans having a purpose, and that having lost that sense has led to emptiness and meaninglessness among human beings as well as in societies. Okay. Professor Agwan.
A man who does not believe in himself is an atheist. Not believing in the glory of our own soul is what Vedanta calls it. If faith in ourselves had been more extensively taught and practiced, I am sure a very large portion of the evils and miseries that we have would have vanished.
Thank you. Okay. Now we can talk. Examples will come later. Yes, Dirisha.
Because you said I have to wait till I say
Yes. Yes. Yes.
I was feeling that there is a very new word, very monotheistic representation of post-enlightenment life. And it looks like there was, even within Europe, there was contradictory views about enlightenment. One example is romantic movement right after the French Revolution. So French Revolution is something which brought this universal virtues of freedom, liberty and all that. So and also the romantic movement that followed right after the French Revolution also talks about moving beyond the science without discarding science, looking at emotions, looking at intuition as also human virtues and human qualities, which was somewhat denied in pre-centuries or early Enlightenment times. So I just want to bring that up.
I think that's a very good point. So of course you are the expert on this more than we are. So my question is, would it be true? It is true that there was a romantic movement. What has sustained and come to the 21st century from that time? There were these various movements and their philosophies were there at that time. What has come down to us? Is this what has come down to us more than the romantic movement? Because that's what the McIntyre's claim is that. So
I feel there is some sort of romanticism about the pre-Enlightenment era, that when we don't follow the traditional religion, everything was ethical and virtuous. And then as we moved away from religion and tradition to science and whatever that followed after was, somewhat representative of not so ethical type.
That is correct.
Comes down as a binary, or it's like romanticizing the past.
No, I wouldn't say romanticizing the past. I think if I were to put it in one statement, I would say that the pre-Enlightenment view was that there was a causal relationship between a virtuous life and happiness. Number one, and number two, that there was actually a goal to human life. It was not necessarily romantic. I don't think anybody says that society was more beautiful than this society. But the notions, there was a notion, these notions were there. And now these notions are not there. And the world, the emptiness in the world today, the lack of our ability to agree on moral truths is because of this lack of foundation, that we don't have a purpose and we don't have a causal relationship. So for example, let me go to an example then. So we all accept that murder, slavery and rape are morally wrong because it is based on the principle that every human being has dignity. And this is a rational principle. Kant said it, everybody said it, there is no discussion, there is no argument. Let's look at another one. Does a life of virtue, which may involve hardship, lead to happiness? Or does a life involving small infractions such as giving bribes to obtain ease and comfort lead to happiness? How would we answer this question today? How many of you, let's take this experiment. How many of you agree with the first one? How many of you agree with the second one? Yes. Yes.
Possible to answer something like the second question without putting that who we are asking that question of, right? If you are someone whose only way of making a livelihood is either to give it price, get certain things, nothing, or even taking some, right? For whatever reason, there might be some socio-economic structure that we can do that, right? So, is there, I think part of the thing here really is that as you get more voices to the conversation, people's ideas of morality might be different, right? Which is not to say that there is no morality, there is no virtue, or there is no virtue. So I'm finding it hard to answer these questions in the abstract or in the universal.
Let's look at us. If this is the population to which this question is asked,
I think both questions are linked. Two things. One is leading to happiness may mean just touching it and coming back, then both can lead to happiness. That is, you can touch this happiness state and go. So really the question would be, can it lead to sustainable happiness?
Eudaimonia. We're talking about eudaimonia here, which is a state of.
Could be in a state of eudaimonia for a moment and come back.
Yeah, no, by definition Aristotle said it is not a state, so I'm sorry we didn't elaborate on that because of lack of time, but it is a long-term state achieved by living a life. Yes, it's a stable long-term state.
The best response.
Yes, right. So given that, so as I said, I'm using the term happiness only because the brain will accept that more easily than eudaimonia. But that's what, so that is the definition of happiness. It's a long-term state achieved over a life, you know, not spikes like that. Yeah, with that.
Yeah, and for the second thing is, unless we have a solid definition of virtue or hardship or whatever, or even infractions.
Bribes, right? Let's be specific. Not giving bribes, which may involve hardships. Does a life where one does not give bribes and therefore will involve hardships lead to happiness, or does a life where it's giving small bribes and therefore leading to more ease and comfort lead to eudaimonia? All right, that is a question. Yes.
You can't build a house without bribing
Yeah.
Till I don't know the situation.
Yeah.
5 years. So you have to pay, right? The reality. Yeah, but we are kind of happy. Kind of happy.
I think happiness house is built.
Yeah.
Understanding of justice. I may answer both yes, or I may answer both no, depending on how do I invoke justice and which element of justice I may invoke and whether I value justice as a virtue or not.
Correct. I agree with you. So I agree with you, and I agree with Janaki, and I agree with Bidisha and Subhajit. Here is the point, therefore. The point of this whole presentation is it has become extremely difficult to teach a course on ethics today. You all agree to that, isn't it? Because how do you define what is right? There is no standard by which to define right. So interestingly, as most of you know, I'm teaching the ethics course the second time this semester. I taught it 2 years ago the first time. In the first lecture of that course, Balaji said, I want to come and talk to the class. I said, please come. So he came and, you know, basically it was the only course offer the whole class was taking. So he came and said, you know, how important such courses are and this, that and the other. And then he made a statement which I didn't understand till much later. He said he is glad that Professor Chetan Parikh has the courage to teach this course. I didn't know why he said it. After I finished teaching, I realized it is so hard. What do you teach? How do you teach? You know, so I'm talking about teaching only as an example. The point is, any discussion on morality today, any discussion on how do we decide what is right and wrong has become extremely difficult. This is just one small presentation demonstrating this this state of ours, what we are in today. It was very easy. It was very easy 500 years ago. It was not a beautiful life, but this was easy. Right? Defining morality was easy. Now it has become extremely difficult. We have no standard. And abortion, right? Is abortion right or wrong? To me, one question that needs to be answered before we can answer that question is, when does life begin? If we all agreed that life began at such and such a point during the pregnancy, the debate will go away. Because the whole debate is, half the population says abortion is killing life. The other says, no, it is not life. Therefore, the woman must have choice. Because we don't know how to define when life begins. Science does not have an answer to a lot of our questions. And because science doesn't have an answer, and we have rejected every other source of answers, possible sources, therefore we are left adrift. This is what? Yes?
So, religious supremacy has its own advantage. Because if a religion said that
yes.
good is bad, then
yes.
we would have approved and we would have gone ahead.
Correct.
It would have been a standard defined.
Correct.
But now we don't.
That is correct. Because there is no faith in religion. Because religion is so screwed up, they say more wrong than right. You look at any religion, it says more wrong than right. Although there is a lot of right in every religion.
No, I think the problem with that, my problem with that statement is that, again, who matters? For someone who is rich and well-to-do, you can afford to lead maybe a virtuous life, and that's what maybe the religions might say. But for someone who is surviving for livelihood, based on what are historical reasons, following that code might not be possible. So again, that relativism here comes in. Problem with religion is it imposes a universal set of things for everyone.
No, let's not go into the discussion of the problems of religion. That's a separate discussion. So yes, Amit.
Find right or wrong answer with Chetan, the right to life, while you are discussing it in the case of abortion, may become a subordinate right when you are discussing it in the context of right to property. So someone who is dying and is stealing will still be put behind bars because their right to life is subordinate to right to property. So why is it that we are actually trying to find very absolute and definite right or wrong answers to the situation that we are in? Where is this requirement coming from?
Wow. Why do we need to define what is right? I don't know. I have to think about that. Why do we need to define what is right?
I think way back when you were talking about Aristotle, you had mentioned in one of the slides that most of these virtues can be resolved only within a context. So why are we trying to resolve this question in a context-free fashion? So that's that is in the sense, unless we understand the context or the contextual boundaries which we resolve it, and this is somewhat intrigued by the concept of right to life being subordinate to right to property. So does it mean that if someone trespasses my property, I can kill them because their right to life is subordinated to my right to property?
No, I don't think that's what Amit said. I think you said something else.
Yeah, I think I agree with the context. So it will be the context in which a particular right will become whatever. Will become subordinate or not. The context matters, and because context matters, absolute right or absolute wrong is something like universal truth. It's something that we probably may not believe, or not everyone may be comfortable with this notion. Absolute truth.
Okay. Yeah.
If you are reading how many references to phenomena observed in the animal kingdom, ape colonies or colonies of primates.
Yeah.
Since chimpanzees have been known to hunt for pure pleasure, they have been known to hunt their own people in their own, whatever you call a collective.
No, I have not read that part, but generally what I did read in the context of morality in the animal kingdom, what is found is that a lot of animals that are social have kind of instinctive notions of cooperation and reciprocity, where and even sacrifice, which are motivated by the propagation of the species. So, for example, evolutionary, yeah. So there is a whole field of evolutionary ethics also. Yeah. So I have not, I mean, the specific I have not seen. Yes.
So I have a remark which may possibly show some light to the question, why do we want to know? So we want to know because we need to decide. At every step we want to decide. And one thing, I don't know how much it applies to everyone, I imagine that it applies to many people, is that if we are making a decision on the basis of, so there are two things, one is subsistence, that is we need to survive, and the other is beauty. So subsistence is in substance, decisions made on the basis of subsistence give a sense of bondage, and decisions made on the basis of beauty give a sense of freedom. If we are doing something beautiful, we feel free. If we do something because we want to survive or we are afraid of our survival or whatever it might be, it makes us feel bonded. And probably the question of ethics is the choice between freedom and bondage. And we want to feel free. And that's why we want to do things of beauty. We want to be free of the need to always think about our survival. So we want to reach that stage where we are making less and less choices based upon subsistence issues and more choice based upon our taste and beauty. That's why we want to make that transition, and that's why we want to.
Some of our tribal societies are enjoying both together. Subsistence, so they are not concerned with insurance and longer term things. So they work on subsistence. They are also very beautiful in terms of whatever they see.
So we need to go back there then.
I think subsistence and beauty, I think from the other more civilized societies accept that may not be intrinsic or natural, because a lot of tribal societies still work on everyday subsistence. It's not say storage and those kind of hoarding. And they are beautiful in terms of whatever they are seeing.
It could also mean that the rich are happy by definition, by according to your definition. Right. Because they have no subsistence questions. So the Malyas and everyone can be there.
If they are still stuck in the subsistence, we want these larger, few thousand crores. That's still subsistence. You have to be on the top of it.
No, I think what Sujit is saying. I think what Sujit is saying is the aggrandizing mode. Or what was the word you used? Gathering, I mean, hoarding mode. So I think subsistence may be the wrong term. What you're saying is one is in a hoarding mode and one is in a beauty mode. So one needs to get out of the hoarding mode.